streetcars stuck in their tracks, and people were advised to stay home. Schools stayed shut on what was set to be the return of in-person learning. Quebec, too, has declared a snow day. Good evening and thanks for joining us. It is not that we don't expect any snowfall, it's the amount combined with the strong winds that's the issue. This satellite image shows what a beast of a snowstorm this is swirling across the region. Toronto is forecast to get between 40 to 60 centimeters, Ottawa between 30 to 50 centimeters. We have complete coverage tonight beginning with Mike Drolet in Toronto.
It was a rude awakening for much of Ontario, and dogs were no exception. The storm came in fast, leaving a swath from Niagara through Ottawa under a deep blanket of snow. Up to 60 centimeters in parts. The traditional snow belt south of Lake Ontario saw whiteout conditions and drifts that confounded even the plows. Nobody was immune to getting stuck, not even buses and fire trucks. Early in the morning, commuters who weren't already working remotely were urged to stay home. And when two of Toronto's largest highways were shut down because crews couldn't keep up, the city's other arteries turned into traffic jams.
Hysterical. I mean, I've been driving for 30 years. I have never seen anything like this. You know what I mean? It's like so many cars in a ditch on the side of the road.
And then, in the city infamous for calling in the army to combat snow, Ontario's premier digging out cars and giving people lifts, unmasked, in his own.
Should have called out the army.
The taxi driver today.
Toronto never gets massive snowfall. Well, obviously not never, because I can barely walk down this road and it's completely impassable over here. But rarely. A typical year will see the top snowfall at 15 to 20 centimeters. And today, with well over 30 centimeters, we're looking at a top 10 day in the city's history. What makes this storm so unique was the path it took to get here.
It's dipped far south across the United States before coming up the eastern seaboard. So that was a bit more unusual. Usually we would see a system like this affecting Quebec and Maritimes.
For once, Ottawa may have had a snow day milder than Toronto's, although they were digging out there too, making the most of this unplanned down day.
It's awfully coincidental on the day that the kids are supposed to go back to school that it one further delay in returning them to some semblance of normalcy.
In that regard, this may have been exactly what kids needed. A day to be kids again, to hit the hills with toboggans in tow and make a snow angel or two. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
I'm Mike Armstrong in Montreal. If there's a positive from this story, maybe it didn't catch anyone by surprise. It was one of those all-hands-on-deck operations, even before the snow started falling. Salt trucks and snow plows hit the roads, and the public was told if you can, stay off the roads. If you've had the chance to stay home and warm, that's fine. For the most part, people followed that advice. There was little traffic just about anywhere. Streets looked like ghost towns. There was actually less accumulation than predicted, but there were strong gusts.
Worried about power failures. That's my biggest concern.
Because the wind?
Yeah.
Those fears didn't materialize, and there was another positive, the temperature. Montreal just spent several days in a deep freeze. Monday was about 20 degrees Celsius warmer than it's been. Given the choice between having snow or frigid temperatures, the choice for some was simple. Oh, that's way that's down. I really need a break. My face is gonna fall off. For kids, with this snow day, there was little suspense. Schools announced Sunday they'd be closed, extending the already extended holiday break.
We're not supposed to be home. Kids are supposed to be at school. Everything was supposed to be back to normal. Not yet.
After 3 weeks with a 10 p.m. pandemic curfew, Quebecers can now stay out late. Not that there's much to do. Bars, gyms, theaters, most things are still closed. Ironically, one pandemic measure few complained about Monday was masks.
Well, actually, the mask kind of helps.
Another positive on a day like today is seeing people help each other. In this case, it was a man in a pickup who pulled a couple out of a snowbank. He was offered cash for his kindness. The answer was a simple, absolutely not. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
this today. And a final note about that storm. A young Ottawa boy is being credited for saving a neighbor. Ottawa paramedics thanked this 8-year-old. They say he located an elderly man who had fallen in deep snow and was almost covered. The boy spotted him and had his parents called 911.
Oh, was that some snow falling off the roof?
Drug called Paxlovid is the first at-home COVID treatment to get the green light in Canada. It could play a critical role in reducing pressure on hospitals. Abigail Beeman reports on how the treatment works and when Canadians can expect to get access to it.
Add another word to your pandemic vocabulary, Paxlovid.
This is the first oral COVID-19 therapy that can be taken by patients at home.
Health Canada has approved Pfizer's antiviral drug.
Particularly important, as access to easy-to-use treatments could help to reduce the severity of COVID-19 in adults who become newly infected and are at high risk.
If given early, within the first 3 to 5 days of symptoms, Pfizer's data shows the drug can reduce hospitalizations and deaths 85 to 89%. But delivering it fast can be a challenge, especially right now with tests tough to get across the country. The Public Health Agency recommends provinces save it for those at highest risk, but there's a long list of medications you can't mix it with, affecting lots of already high-risk people. And there are only 30,000 courses of treatment in the country now, with 1 million purchased in total for this year.
We all know that the supply isn't going to be great at the start. So for the Omicron wave itself, it may contribute, but it won't be a key contributor to the current wave.
Compared to vaccines, we are, of course, a substantially more expensive option.
Dr. Christopher Labo says initial estimates before any bulk discounts or negotiations were $700 for a 5-day treatment, compared to an estimated $20 per vaccine, though the government won't say what it's paying for either.
When you think of it in terms of preventing people from getting into hospital, they probably are cost effective, because keeping somebody in hospital for 5 days is very, very expensive.
Among the high priority groups recommended to access the drug, the unvaccinated.
It's much better to be vaccinated and not to run the risk of having a severe case of COVID-19 than to have to be treated.
And as welcome news as this approval is, it's still early days.
We don't even have any peer-reviewed data on this medication either, right? We know a little bit about the drug based on what the company has revealed, but it would be helpful if we had more information.
There's a second antiviral drug in the pipeline. Canada has already purchased 500,000 of Merck treatment with options to double that. That drug is still under review by Health Canada. Donna?
All right, Abigail Beeman in Ottawa, thank you. New vaccination requirements for truckers crossing the Canada-U.S. border went into effect over the weekend. In Manitoba, drivers protesting that new mandate slowed traffic at one crossing. Early this morning, truckers caused delays at the Emerson border crossing.
Thanks.
Called a slow roll
Didn't mean for you to have to go all the way out there.
Crossing from the U.S., unvaccinated Canadian truck drivers must show proof of a negative PCR test and then self-isolate for 14 days. In China, authorities have issued a curious request. They are urging people not to order goods from overseas, claiming packages sent by mail could spread the Omicron variant. Beijing confirmed its first case of the Omicron variant on Saturday. Officials say they believe the woman who tested positive may have contracted the virus from a piece of mail received from Canada 4 days earlier. Authorities say they tested the letter and found traces of the virus.
I guess misinformation works for some. They might as well start it too.
More than 16,000 people have been tested. This is not the first time Chinese officials have linked COVID to packages from abroad. Experts say the virus is airborne, and it is extremely unlikely that international mail could transmit it.
I would say it's virtually impossible for a great package that was shipped to China from Canada to carry with it infectious virus that would result in a transmission of it. And the reason for that is that we know that this virus does not survive long on inanimate surfaces.
Beijing's first confirmed case of Omicron comes at a bad time for Olympic organizers. The games are set to begin in just over 2 weeks. Organizers are now stepping up measures to try to limit the spread. Today they said tickets to Olympic events will be available to targeted groups only, not to the general public, and strict public health measures will be in place. Spectators from overseas were already banned. We have exclusive new details tonight about a small group of Canadian special forces being deployed to Ukraine. Diplomatic talks aimed at avoiding armed conflict are at a standstill, and an estimated 100,000 Russian troops are stationed along Ukraine's border. Michael Couture explains what we know about the Canadian deployment.
CSOR is an elite group of Canadian Special Forces operators. A small group of them is now in Ukraine. They're looking at potential options to support the Ukrainian government and planning for the possible evacuation of Canadian diplomatic personnel. Sources tell Global News the deployment is part of an attempt by NATO to deter Russian aggression. It's a message aimed at Vladimir Putin in response to his amassing of an estimated 100,000 troops on the Russian-Ukraine border.
Make them understand that any possible gain that you have from large-scale military action or even military success in Ukraine would generate a cost that would be outside, that would be far more than any benefit.
Another symbol of support, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly met today with Ukraine's Prime Minister under the guise of trade and economic cooperation. But there's more at play.
It is a pleasure for me to come here and to send a strong message on the part of my government, but on the part of Canadians as well.
Joly's presence is part of the ongoing support Canada has provided since 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea. Canada has committed hundreds of millions of dollars to Kyiv in the last 8 years and has helped train Ukrainian security forces.
I think it does send a message to Russia that who is part of the alliance that is willing to stand up to them and show their support and through programming, through diplomatic means, etc.
Canada is a member of that alliance with NATO, the UK, and the United States, which sent a bipartisan delegation of senators Monday to reaffirm its support for Ukraine's sovereignty. Some experts believe this is about more than just an ally in Eastern Europe.
What happens in Ukraine will signal to other authoritarian regimes, in particular China. And therefore, it's important for the West to stand collectively.
Especially as talks to de-escalate tensions in the region seem to be at a dead end. Michael Couture, Global News, Ottawa.
Moments of impact coming up. What's happened to the people of Tonga after that massive undersea volcano? It's now been 2 days since a massive undersea volcanic eruption near the South Pacific country of Tonga, and the extent of the damage is still unclear. Communication remains cut off because the country's main undersea phone and internet cable was damaged. New video has emerged showing the moment it happened. Atmospheric sensors have detected large amounts of sulfur dioxide gas released by the eruption, which could cause acid rain in Tonga and Fiji. Today, air forces from Australia and New Zealand conducted surveillance flights. Aid groups say they're still trying to determine the impact on Tonga.
We roughly thinking up to 80,000 people could be affected. But how many of them are seriously affected? We don't know yet.
The first death to be reported is a 50-year-old British woman. Her family says she was on a beach with her husband trying to rescue her dogs when she was swept away.
She loved animals. When she started her charity in Tonga, it was to help the stray dogs that they have there.
The impact of the eruption was felt across the South Pacific and as far away as Alaska. Authorities in northern Peru say 2 people drowned after they were caught in the tsunami triggered by the eruption. There is an update tonight on the water problems plaguing the capital of Nunavut. Officials in Iqaluit are setting up a river water filling station for residents worried about the tap water. Last week, the city said trace amounts of fuel were detected in the water supply after residents reported the smell. Officials say the water is still okay to drink, but they've set up another option while they flush the system as a precaution. People are being told to bring their own jugs. The water is from the river, so it must be boiled for at least 1 minute. Last fall, Iqaluit spent 2 months under a water emergency because the water supply was contaminated by fuel. Ahead, how a groundbreaking new vaccine could help ensure no country is left behind. The way out of the pandemic is vaccination, which reduces serious illness and death. But vaccines have to reach everyone, not just people in wealthy countries. In Canada, nearly 78% of the population is now fully vaccinated. Compare that to a country like Nigeria, where only about 2% of people are fully immunized. Progress has been slow because COVID-19 vaccines are expensive, complex to produce, and protected by patents. Now, scientists in Texas are working to overcome all of that. Jackson Prosco reports.
As high-tech COVID vaccines have rolled out in wealthy nations, the developing world has largely been left behind, unable to afford them and unable to produce them.
We've done an appalling job of actually sharing vaccines and ensuring that the world is vaccinated.
It's an urgent problem. Epidemiologists have warned the next virus variant could emerge in a highly unvaccinated population, the way Delta and Omicron did.
We are only going to get in front of this pandemic and have vaccines widely available when you have vaccines that are being produced locally, distributed locally, and are made at scale.
Researchers in Texas have found a way to do just that, developing a vaccine called Corbevax. It's based on traditional vaccine technology that can easily and cheaply be made almost anywhere.
And we think it's a game changer. Many manufacturers can make it, and they have all the ecosystems in place.
Dr. Maria Elena Bottazzi and Dr. Peter Hotez started their vaccine research after the 2003 SARS outbreak. When COVID-19 arrived, they realized what they had.
And then, of course, when we saw the sequence, we said, oh my God, this is like 80% similar to the SARS sequence.
What's more, they're making the vaccine formula free to anyone who wants it. No patents, no licenses, simply a gift to the world.
When you're in a crisis, you really want to do things that are morally imperative and that, that you address the urgency.
In clinical trials, the two-dose Corbevax has proven 80% effective against the Delta variant. Studies into Omicron and boosters are ongoing. In India, one manufacturer is already planning to produce 1.2 billion doses per year.
Look, if you want to develop vaccines for the public good, you need to share your knowledge.
In developing their vaccine, the researchers hope they've created a global model for tackling future diseases, one driven by the need to save as many lives everywhere as quickly as possible. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
Conquering the Atlantic next from Europe to America, why he's going it alone in a boat. Celebrations are just getting started for this guy, Jonathan, a giant tortoise. He's believed to be turning 190 this year, which makes him the oldest living land animal. And now he's got a Guinness World Record under his shell, too. He's the oldest living Colonian. That's a category that includes turtles, terrapins, and tortoises. Jonathan lives on the grounds of the governor's residence on the island of St. Helena, arriving from the Seychelles way back in 1882. Well, slow and steady wins the race, and a British man is attempting to live by that rule. He is attempting to row solo without any help from Europe to North America. Jack Jarvis hasn't hit the halfway mark yet, and he's already dreaming about his next epic fundraiser. Crystal Gamansing spoke with the 28-year-old about his trek across the open ocean.
A tiny speck in the Atlantic, Jack Jarvis is rowing unsupported from Europe to North America, and he's trying to do it in 100 days. With every punishing stroke, he's hoping to raise money for brain tumor research, a tribute to his grandfather. His brutal endeavor has raised more than $25,000 so far, but he's got a lot of ocean left to cover. We found him in the middle of the Atlantic where he's been rowing 14 hours a day for more than 40 days. And he's been doing it without a critical survival resource.
I didn't bring enough coffee bags, so I've only got enough for one a day. But I'll have to reuse it if I want multiple coffees a day, so that's pretty tough.
That ability to laugh and adapt are proving important for the 28-year-old.
Singapore is a
time alone on the water thinking about his granddad can bring up a wave of emotions. He's sharing those insights along the way, documenting his journey on social media.
I definitely think we need to go out and get after it, push themselves, challenge themselves, the sense of satisfaction afterwards is so much better than, anything you get.
If that's true, the endorphin rush may produce all-out euphoria when he reaches land in Florida, hopefully in March.
16 miles in the wrong direction. Is what it is. It's not looking great.
Testing his strength, spirit, and what he can manage on only one good cup of coffee a day. Crystal Gavancing, Global News, London.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is this pair of otters from Holcomb Beach, British Columbia. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
I feel I need to go outside, but I can't. I need my snowshoes to work.
Good evening and welcome to Gravitas at Bankisha Partner. Let's get started.
But you have more than one pair.
Yes, but they don't have good. My bindings, good bindings are on the pair that I can't get the bindings back onto. They've come off.
Mm.
20 million Chinese are under lockdown.
Something will go. Chinese and
Beijing is blaming.
Do you know how many people have died of the Wuhan virus since April 2020? More than 5 million, the world over. Do you know how many people have died in China since April 2020? 0. No deaths and a few thousand cases. China wants you to believe that it has defeated the Wuhan virus. They even threw a grand party to celebrate it in Wuhan. Then they came up with a zero COVID policy. If wishes were horses, beggars would ride, and China would have no Wuhan virus cases. But that is not to be. China is suffering multiple outbreaks as we speak. 20 million people are under lockdown, and the Beijing Winter Olympic Games, which were supposed to prove to the world how China has beaten the pandemic, are now in jeopardy. All the bubbles and fences of the CCP have not been able to keep the virus at bay. Cases have been reported in Beijing, and China is blaming the world outside for it. A letter from Canada and troops from Vietnam. Like they say in Alice in Wonderland, it gets curiouser and curiouser. We'll tell you all about it. Also on the show tonight, is Europe heading for war? Russia is pulling out people from Ukraine. Canada and the UK are sending military support. Washington has dispatched Antony Blinken. We'll bring you the latest. Escalating conflict in the Korean Peninsula too. Kim Jong-un has tested 4 missiles in 2 weeks. What is he trying to do? We'll discuss that. In West Asia, the Gulf Coalition fires back at the Houthis the day after the drone attacks in Abu Dhabi. And science can be dangerous sometimes.
You do get limits you don't get anywhere in North American channels, you know?
Rays of the sun. Scientists have warned against it. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Even as scientists warn of the long-lasting damage to the environment due to the Tonga eruption, 3 deaths were confirmed due to the disaster. Meanwhile, high waves following the eruption caused an oil spill on the Peruvian coast, turning the golden sand black. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson denying an accusation by his former advisor, Dominic Cummings, that he had lied to Parliament about a lockdown party.
Nobody told me, and nobody said that
This was something that was against the rule, saying nobody had warned him that the gatherings might break COVID-19 rules. At least 7 people have been killed after security forces in Sudan's capital used gunfire and tear gas to disperse protests against a coup. Protest organizers in Khartoum announced a 2-day strike and civil disobedience. Benchmark oil prices climbed to their highest level since 2014 as a possible supply disruption after the attacks in the Mideast Gulf added to a tight supply outlook. The supply concerns rose after Yemen's Houthi group attacked the UAE, escalating hostilities. A massive protest was organized by activists and the people of Sindh in Pakistan, condemning both China and Pakistan for exploiting the resources of the province for profit. The protest also marked the 118th birth anniversary of veteran Sindh nationalist G.M. Syed. Activists in Sindh demand freedom from Pakistan.
Well, today is a very difficult day for our state. The hospital system is under extreme pressure.
Australia records its deadliest day of the pandemic so far, with 77 deaths reports across the country. Healthcare workers will be diverted from private hospitals to the public network to help fight the surge in Omicron cases. More than 4,200 flights in the United States were cancelled or delayed as a winter snowstorm crept up the East Coast into Canada, dumping 2 feet of snow in some areas. Motorists were stranded on highways while nearly 90,000 homes and businesses in the U.S. suffered power outages. And Indonesia's parliament passes a bill to relocate the nation's capital from Jakarta to an area on Borneo Island. The new capital has been named Nusantara, the Javanese name for the Indonesian archipelago. The government envisions the new capital as a low-carbon super hub. Reigning U.S. Open champion Emma Raducanu is through to the second round of the Australian Open after a 3-set win over Sloane Stephens. On her senior debut in Melbourne, the 19-year-old Brit won 6-love, 2-6, 6-1. World number 2 Arina Sabalenka also progressed with her first win of the season. In the men's draw, Stefanos Tsitsipas eased past Sweden's Mikael Ymer. Real Madrid and Spain legend Francisco Paco Gento has died at the age of 88. Gento, who spent 18 years with Real, is the only player in history to have won 6 European Cups. The left winger made 600 appearances for the club between 1953 and 1971, scoring 182 goals. He won 43 caps for Spain and is regarded as one of the country's greatest ever players.
China, like most countries, is dealing with an Omicron surge. But China, unlike most countries, is punishing its own people for its homemade virus. Let me show you some videos. They're believed to be from Tianjin, a city close to Beijing. Look at the massive crowd here. Reports say that these people have been without food for several days. They shouted that they were hungry. Instead of helping them, the government unleashed force on them. A large contingent of police was dispatched to crush the protest. This is what followed.
Wow, that's unheard of. How do they get video of that?
China today, violating COVID protocols is an unforgivable sin. Here's another video. A man was caught without a mask. Look at how he was dragged away by a cop. Right now, several Chinese provinces are reporting an outbreak. More locally transmitted infections are being detected every day. The Winter Games begin in less than 3 weeks from now. It's an important event for Beijing. China wanted to use this occasion to prove to the world how it has contained the virus and how it is now immune to the pandemic. But Omicron has punctured its propaganda bubble. And now there are new allegations of snooping. On Gravitas Tonight, we'll tell you all about it. We'll start with the numbers as always. China's Wuhan virus data remains questionable. Last week, we showed you how China was using massive quarantine centers to contain the spread. They look just like detention centers. Now, even the data cannot hide the surge. As of 16th January, mainland China had more than 105,000 confirmed Wuhan virus cases. All of these patients are showing symptoms. More than 20 million people are under lockdown. There are 20 high-risk areas, 57 medium-risk areas, which means there is a high chance of infection in all of these districts. What is driving the new infections? The Omicron variant. It is spreading like wildfire. And these are not imported cases. A local health official has made an admission. He says Omicron has been spreading in China for 3 months now.
The Omicron strain has only been spreading for about 3 months. People's understanding of this new variant is not complete. We must waste no time in treating it. Don't be careless. It's not the same as the flu.
Omicron has now made its way to China's political, financial, and technology centers. Local transmission has been detected in Tianjin, Dalian, Anyang, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Zhongshan, and now Beijing, the capital city of China. Omicron has breached the borders of Beijing. Lockdowns are being reinforced. How many cases are we talking about? 4. 4 cases. That's all that China has reported. Apparently, there are only 4 new cases in Beijing. 3 patients have tested positive for Omicron. The 4th one is positive for Delta. Now look at China's response. Why does Beijing need such sweeping measures to deal with 4 cases? An entire office has been locked down. The first patient who tested positive worked here, so local authorities locked up all the employees inside. They will be forced to live inside their office for several days now. Health officials were seen bringing pillows and bedding for them. And it's not just offices that are being sealed. Venues for the Winter Games are out of bounds for people. The sale of tickets to the general public has been banned. The Winter Olympic bubble has been fenced. The venue looks like a garrison. The bubble is spread across nearly 200 kilometers, and the entire area has been fenced. Inside it, medical professionals conduct daily Wuhan virus tests. Those staying here will travel in police-escorted buses. Robots have been deployed to transfer food. It's a nice gimmick. But teams staying in this bubble are more worried about something else. Snooping. Several countries have issued advisories to their athletes. They've been asked to leave their phones at home and use burner devices instead. What are burner devices? These are basically cheap prepaid mobile phones for temporary use. They're to be discarded after use. Hence the name, burner phones. Why do athletes need these in China? Because they fear their phones could be compromised with malicious software. So each team is coming up with its own protocols against possible snooping attempts. The Australian team will have its own Wi-Fi for its players. Dutch athletes will use burner phones. They've been asked to destroy their devices once they return. The same with the Brits. Athletes will be given burner phones by the UK government. Canadian players have been asked to limit their personal information, the information they store on the devices which they bring to China. What is China's response to these fears? As always, Beijing remains dismissive.
We have taken note of the relevant reports, and the spokesperson of the Beijing Olympic Organizing Committee has also answered similar questions. The questions raised by certain countries about China's so-called cybersecurity are completely unfounded and an attempt to conjure up things from thin air.
First, the stain of a genocide, then the threat of the Wuhan virus, and now fears of snooping by the Chinese state. If the Olympics had a match for controversy, China would have won the gold for sure. And here's a match that they're certainly losing. The one against the Wuhan virus. China's strategy is called Zero COVID. It has failed. It's an extreme policy. Lockdowns, travel bans, long quarantines. The idea is to bring infections down to zero. Same for accountability, you could say. China follows a zero accountability strategy. It's not their fault that the cases are rising. It's not their fault that Omicron has reached China.
Everything is a foreign import. The latest target is the mail. Your letters and couriers from abroad. According to China, Beijing has 3 cases of Omicron. And the first case came from a letter that was sent from Canada. It first went to the United States, then to Hong Kong, and finally reached Beijing on the 11th of January. The Omicron patient apparently got the virus from this letter. So guess what China is doing? Disinfecting all foreign mail. Is equal parts of funny and stupid. The chances of infection through surface is extremely low. In 3 days, 99% of viruses disappear in all surfaces. 3 days, 99% gone. That's what science says. When was this letter sent? On the 7th of this month. The chances are this is community transmission, not infected males. China does
waiting for a part to arrive.
All they care about is
It hasn't gotten there yet.
That's what's going to be done today.
spreads in China, or Canada mails Omicron to Beijing.
Okay.
You know which one they pick. And this is not China's first time. Every virus cluster has been blamed on foreign imports. Different products for the same theory. Earlier,
we can let one more X.
Sure.
Apparently, dragon fruits
Chew.
from Vietnam were infected. So what did China do?
But don't cook them quite as long, okay? Mine.
Last year, there was a cluster in Dalian. And this time, China blamed frozen meat for it. Apparently, the Wuhan virus was latching onto imported packets. Again, no scientific logic. And you cannot ignore the pattern here. Every time there is an outbreak, China comes up with such excuses. Infected couriers, infected foods, contaminated meat. At the same time, they deny the most obvious reason for these clusters, community transmission. If it can happen in 190 countries, it can happen in China. In fact, it started in China. But who will question Beijing? The World Health Organization talks about everything under the sun, about boosters, about COVID conspiracies, even about the Ethiopian civil war, but no comment on these unscientific claims by China. Talk about
And then set a timer for 7 minutes. You feel like 6 minutes?
Yes, please. 6.
To remember
Okay.
what they were saying there. Don't call it the virus from China. Don't blame the wet markets of Wuhan. Don't accuse the poor old bats in Hubei. Why not? Because it could hurt China's feelings. Those questions were based on science. But if you ask them, you were called racist. You were politicizing a health crisis. Well, what about now? China is blaming frozen meat from India, dragon fruits from Vietnam, and couriers from Canada. So where is the outrage? Why is no one calling China racist, or at the very least, stupid? China has a new excuse for every variant. For Delta, it was meat. For Omicron, it is a leopard. At this rate, who knows what's coming next? China wants to shut down supermarkets. It is free to do so. If they want to disinfect couriers, go ahead. But be honest about it. Don't blame other countries without a shred of evidence. And I know that's asking too much. China's entire strategy is pinned on manipulation and lies. Some of it is mind-boggling. Listen to this. Since April 2020, guess how many infections China has reported? 22,000, that's all. 22,000 cases in 657 days. Guess how many deaths? 0. In this time, the world reported 5.5 million deaths, but China, 0 deaths. This is the secret of their zero COVID strategy. Why collect all that data? You can just fake it. And the worst part is, very few people are questioning this. China says 0 deaths, the world says good job. China says fruits are infected, the world says good joke. But no, this is not funny at all. Every country is blamed for inefficient policies. They're blamed for large public gatherings. They're blamed for vaccine hesitancy, and rightly so. But the Chinese regime gets a free pass. Every time cases rise, they dust out the trade book. Whatever China imported that month is responsible for the spike. These fruits, meat, or if nothing else fits, a letter. And not far away from the Chinese mainland, it's raining missiles in the Korean peninsula. No prizes for guessing who's responsible for this one. North Korea. In the last 2 weeks, Pyongyang has test fired 4 ballistic missiles. 4. These back-to-back tests have put regional powers on edge. South Korea and Japan are worried. They're warning against a possible escalation. The United States has also issued a strong response. It says that these tests signal the return of brinkmanship, of unwarranted provocations from Kim Jong-un. The question is, what does
the leader of North Korea wants. What is Kim Jong-un trying to prove? Here's a report.
Indeed, what indeed?
North Korea is betting big on nukes. It sees them as the most potent tool of power projection. Every time it faces a security dilemma, the risk of further diplomatic isolation or questions about its stagnating economy, out come the missiles to reassure the leader, Kim Jong-un. This year, his need for reassurance seems to have snowballed. North Korea has test-fired 4 missiles in the last 2 weeks alone. The first test came on the 5th of January. Pyongyang fired an unidentified projectile off its eastern coast. It reportedly precisely hit a target 700 kilometers away. The Japanese Prime Minister described it as a possible ballistic missile.
Earlier, North Korea launched what could be a ballistic missile in response to this situation. I gave instructions. First is to make every effort to collect and analyze information and to provide prompt, accurate information to the people. Second is to thoroughly confirm the safety of ships, airplanes, and aircrafts. I have just instructed these points.
6 days later came the second test. Another ballistic missile was fired. Photographs show Kim Jong-un dressed in a black leather coat, personally overseeing the test with binoculars. He was also seen discussing a few charts with his officials, more like pretending to. The U.S. State Department described this test as a threat to the international community.
The launch clearly does highlight the destabilizing impact of the DPRK's illicit weapons programs. It violates multiple UN Security Council resolutions. It poses a threat to the DPRK's neighbors and to the broader international community.
January 14th, the third missile test took place. This time, a railway-borne missile was test-fired. It was launched from the top of an olive green train. Interestingly, the test took place on the same day, when Pyongyang expressed discontent over new American sanctions. North Korean observers described the test as a clear retaliation.
Besides, therefore, North Korea is sending a message that they will not give up their right to missiles and will fight back against US-imposed sanctions.
And on Monday, the 17th of January, the fourth test was conducted. A tactical guided missile was fired from the country's west. It reportedly hit a target located on the eastern coast. This time, South Korea has issued a statement. It has urged its rogue neighbor to choose peace over missiles. We urge North Korea to choose peacemaking dialogue rather than missile launches for peace and stability of the Korean Peninsula. Experts say this is Kim's attention-seeking tactic. He is trying to send a message to the Biden administration. Unlike his predecessor Donald Trump, who even visited the DMZ in 2019, Joe Biden has shown no willingness to engage with North Korea. He has refused to ease sanctions unless North Korea takes real steps towards de-escalation. In Kim's rulebook, provocation is the best way to get attention. He's grappling with a broken economy made worse by the pandemic. He's using missiles as bargaining chips, hoping to extract a compromise from Washington. Unfortunately for him, Biden's plate is full. He's dealing with bigger, more serious adversaries like China and Russia. Bureau Report, we are World is One.
The Korean Peninsula is not the only part of the world that's currently facing a security challenge. Experts say Europe may be closer to war than it has been in decades. Why? Because of the Ukraine-Russia crisis. Here's what's happening right now. Nearly 100,000 Russian troops are stationed along Russia's border with Ukraine. The United Kingdom has sent arms to Ukraine. Canada has sent special forces to Ukraine. The US is sending Secretary of State Antony Blinken. They've also promised support and ammunition to Ukraine. Russia has pulled out diplomats from Ukraine. All signs point towards a war. But will there be one? Russian President Vladimir Putin's plans are not clear. NATO is bracing for the worst, and the international media is trying to get the right answer. The slow evacuation may be part propaganda, part preparation for the conflict, or part fake. This is a report. It refers to Russia pulling out diplomats from Ukraine. Reports say Moscow has begun evacuating families of staff who work at Russian diplomatic missions in Ukraine. The New York Times says at least 18 people left Ukraine on the 5th of January. Another 30 followed subsequently. Diplomats have also reportedly been told to leave. When do countries ask their diplomats to come back? In times of conflict or war. So what is Russia preparing for? Neither, says its foreign ministry. Russia insists it's business as usual at the Kiev embassy, and that Moscow is interested in maintaining good neighborly relations. But good neighbors do not line up 100,000 troops and carry out exercises at the border.
Okay, so I wonder if I can see anybody. Is anybody here? Nothing, I'm just talking.
Okay.
Similar images were coming out of Ukraine a couple of days back. Britain says it has sent short-range anti-tank missiles to Kiev, and that it would quote-unquote stand up to bullies. America has made similar promises.
We will give the people of Ukraine the arms, lethal arms, they need to defend their lives and livelihoods.
That was U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal. He, along with some other American senators, had a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev. Zelensky said that Russia was looking for excuses to increase tensions. He also met with the German foreign minister, who then flew down to Moscow to meet her Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. Canada has deployed a small contingent of special forces to Ukraine. Their job is to push back against Russia and evacuate Canadian diplomats should the need arise. If Ukraine has the support of NATO and its allies, Russia is backed by the usual suspects. Reports say Putin will brief Chinese President Xi Jinping in person. It may not happen anytime before February. In the meanwhile, Russia and Belarus will hold joint drills to quote-unquote protect the interests of the Union state. So that's a lot of developments for 24 hours. So many countries involved in this. The question is, where is all of this leading to?
Are you cooking something?
Right.
Experts say there may be an escalation, but not necessarily an all-out military incursion. What is most likely is a hybrid attack. In fact, a cyber attack has already been launched. Ukraine says it has been hit. Putin may not have the appetite for a full-blown war, but that doesn't mean peace for Ukraine. The West is calling for de-escalation, majority drafting sanctions.
So we are continue working on preparation of the sanctions, just in case. Although the intelligence information that we have makes us to believe the possibility of a massive attack in Ukraine is not the most probable scenario.
But is Russia even trying to attack Ukraine? Most of the US-centric media has not bothered to ask this question, and the answer to it depends on who you are. This crisis, like most others, is one of perception. Moscow, from where it's sitting, views the West as the aggressor, and it blames Kiev for its aggressive designs. Russia says it is not planning an attack. Instead, it's the NATO that's quote-unquote undermining regional security. Ukraine says it's a free country, it has every right to try to join the NATO. Russia says NATO at its doorstep poses a threat. It wants a ban on NATO expansion and withdrawal of troops from Eastern Europe. NATO has refused. Russia also held 3 summits with the West. The standoff has not eased. Neither side wants to blink first. Russian President Putin wants to appear strong before his voters at home. foreign policy win in a year. As for NATO, the crisis is existential. It has been struggling for relevance. Climbing down in this conflict may condemn it to irrelevance again. So the lines have been drawn, the sides are clear. It's a classic stalemate, and Ukraine is both the victim and the prize. And we're not done with conflicts yet. In West Asia, attacks seldom go unanswered. If there's a strike, there will be a counter-strike. Earlier today, we saw an example of this. The United Arab Emirates and its partners struck Yemen's capital. Their target was the Houthi rebels. Reports say at least 20 people were killed. This attack was not a surprise. The Houthis began this cycle of violence. On Monday, they dropped bombs in Abu Dhabi. 3 people were killed, including 2 Indians. A few hours later, the UAE promised to take revenge, and today they lived up to that promise. The Saudi-led coalition launched airstrikes in Yemen.
So they're starting it now, of course. Do you think this is okay? It's a little bit runny. Oh yeah, a little bit runny.
It's okay.
Yep. Okay. No,
Clearly, tensions are rising in West Asia, but the question is, why is this happening now? Because the war in Yemen is heating up. Like we told you yesterday, Yemen is in the middle of a civil war. On one side, we have the Houthi rebels backed by Iran. On the other side, there is a coalition led by Saudi Arabia. And the UAE is a part of that coalition. They do not deploy their own soldiers in Yemen, but they train and fund Yemeni troops. Last week, those troops entered the battlefield. They cut through Houthi positions in the oil-rich city of Marib. And how did the Houthis respond? By attacking Abu Dhabi. Monday's attack was a warning to the UAE, stay away from the civil war in Yemen. If not, more attacks could follow.
The operation successfully achieved its objectives. The Yemeni armed forces, while implementing what they promised, renewed their warning to the countries of aggression that they will receive more painful hits.
More painful hits, he says. This is the Houthi warning. And chances are the UAE will respond in kind. This escalation has dashed any hope of a ceasefire in Yemen. In fact, it has opened a new front. You see, the UAE was gradually taking a backseat in this war. In 2019, they began pulling out their soldiers. But Monday's attack would change that equation. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has spoken to his Emirati counterpart. Both men agreed on a joint response. And that's what we saw today, a coalition airstrike on the Yemeni capital. This escalation could change the tide of war in Yemen. And it should concern India too. Around 3.5 million Indians live and work in the UAE. Their lives could be at risk. Monday's attack killed 2 Indians working at an oil facility in Abu Dhabi. The Indian embassy says the victims have been identified. The UAE foreign minister also reached out to India. He spoke with India's external affairs minister S. Jaishankar. New Delhi says it stands in solidarity with the UAE. Most of their other allies have said the same. The US, Britain, the European Union, Jordan, even their newest partner Israel. They've all supported Abu Dhabi. And this kind of support is an insurance for the UAE, a license to retaliate without fear. The problem is, the Houthis are thinking exactly the same. Monday's attack was unprecedented. The Houthis have repeatedly hit Saudi Arabia, but this time they went beyond. They struck the UAE, which is a stable real estate in West Asia. So here is the question. If Saudi Arabia and the UAE are fair game, then who is next? Does this mean the Houthis will target
Thank you, Willem.
There's some salt for you.
Okay.
Not sure what you want to do with this. Take the whole thing or?
Sure. Could I have the mayonnaise too, please?
Mayonnaise? Any horseradish?
Yeah, the horseradish too. And do you know that little white thing for squishing eggs? It's on the. It's just been cleaned, so it's in the little tray there. Just drain.
What tray? This tray?
Yes.
And this is happening after 6 years. Iran has been reaching out to the UAE as well. Last month, Emirati security officials visited Tehran. Their visit came ahead of the nuclear talks in Vienna. So Iran is playing a dangerous game here. Publicly, they're reaching out to the Gulf states. At the same time, their proxies are raining bombs. Is this Iran's way of exerting pressure? Or are the Houthis acting on their own? Either way, it is bad news for West Asia. All of these attacks have spooked the global oil market. The UAE, remember, is the 7th largest oil producer in the world. They pump out 4 million barrels every day.
Here's
So
the
oil
line on the
benchmarks
horseradish.
are shooting up.
We'll
On
come back for the
Tuesday, they
other
hit a
stuff.
7-year high. The way this is unfolding,
Thanks, Willem.
we can be sure of two things. Number one, the golden rupee will get more attacked, not just against Saudi
Egg slicer and
Gulf states as well. And number two, the war in
and
Ukraine is set to escalate.
yeah, I guess if I have the egg slicer, I don't need the fork. Thank you.
More strikes, more prices. Let's turn to Sri Lanka, where things are not getting any better. The country is stuck between settling its debts and ensuring that basic supplies do not run out. Supplies like food and fuel. We told you how Sri Lanka is bracing for power cuts due to a shortage of fuel. Today, they were reported in Colombo, the capital city, and they're expected to get worse in the days ahead. Food supplies are also a problem. Sri Lanka does not have enough money to import food. It is relying on loans and fuel credit lines to meet the demand. But that money is not proving to be enough. For every loan Colombo secures, there is a debt to repay. Our next story tells you how the Rajapaksa government is in a fix.
Thank you, Willem. That's very kind of you.
Food or fuel? What should Sri Lanka purchase first? This is the Rajapaksa government's latest dilemma. It's facing an acute shortage of both these essentials. For months, supermarkets have been rationing milk, sugar, lentils, and vegetables. They're waiting new consignments from authorities, but Colombo doesn't have enough money to import these supplies. Neither does it have enough funds to import fuel. The country's only oil refinery has been shut. Prices of petrol and diesel have skyrocketed. The state-run electricity board is in the midst of a power crisis. It doesn't have enough fuel to ensure a constant supply of electricity. These visuals are from Colombo, where power cuts are already being reported. On Tuesday, they occurred in 4 slots, covering a total of 4 hours. The country's power minister, Yamini Lokuge, says these power cuts will get worse starting the 19th of January. Colombo is relying on fuel credit lines to avoid going dark. Most of these credit lines are flowing from India. Last week, India
Did you get some too?
Yeah.
Good.
Provided another $500 million. The money is meant to help Sri Lanka purchase petroleum products, but it may not be enough. So Colombo has reached out to a local subsidiary of the Indian Oil Corporation. On Monday afternoon, it sought extra fuel supply from the LIOC, a request that had to be turned down due to unavailability of stocks. Why did Sri Lanka make the request at all? Are the fuel credit lines they're getting not enough? They aren't. Shortly after Colombo received $500 million from India, it had to repay the exact same amount in an international sovereign bond. It's a hand-to-mouth existence, balancing debt repayments and basic supplies. Sri Lankan economists want the government to default on its debt repayment. They say Colombo should use the existing foreign reserves to buy fuel, food, and medicines. But it's easier said than done. Every time it defaults on its debt, Sri Lanka's credit rating is hit further. This will make attracting new investments even tougher, and will send the country deeper into junk territory. Report Wheel, World is One.
Chinese debt pushed Sri Lanka into this crisis. Now, Central Asia could be the next victim of China's debt trap. One of the major borrowers is Kyrgyzstan. It has borrowed close to $2 billion from China. There are growing concerns over Kyrgyzstan's ability to pay back these Chinese loans. Is Kyrgyzstan caught in a Chinese debt trap? Is Chinese debt dictating the foreign policy of the Central Asian country? Will it take a stand against the persecution of Uyghurs? Today we pose these questions to Jumart Oturbay, the former Prime Minister of Kyrgyzstan. Here's an excerpt from that conversation. Mr. Oturbay, welcome to Beyond. You also share a border with Xinjiang, the region where China has been accused of persecuting more than 1 million Uyghur Muslims. According to some estimates, there are around 50,000 Uyghurs in Kyrgyzstan. Do you believe the genocide of Uyghurs in China poses a security challenge in your country?
All five Central Asian countries maintain excellent relationship with China. No problem. No problem. We demarcated and delimited.
Okay, so now I've started recording.
Big Chinese investors in all our five countries for very good political relationships, and we trust the Chinese government on terms of what they're saying. The words which you're using, they are not really line up with that. We trust that the Chinese government is responsible and a trustable partner, and we believe for that. I know, of course, there's a
You still have the mayonnaise in there?
Here it is.
United States of China and each US.
I'll make, next time I make mayonnaise, I'll put horseradish in it.
Next thing what?
Next time I make mayonnaise, I will put horseradish in it.
Oh, right.
Oops.
There's no challenge, not challenge. Chinese is a very small state. I've been in Urumqi in the capital of Xinjiang, many times. I communicate with everyone. I didn't see anything what the US is claiming to happen there.
I've seen your previous interview where you said that all is well in Xinjiang, that there is remarkable development, and you seem to have a very different picture, very different perception of this region than the rest of the world, including the United States, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, who are all boycotting the Beijing Winter Olympics over China's human rights abuses. But if we were to go by your assessment, sir, on how things are in Xinjiang at the moment, why do you think China is blocking moves by the United Nations Human Rights Office to investigate these claims of genocide? Why is China not giving the world access to Xinjiang?
China is a big country. It's the second economy in the world. They have their own priorities in internal and external politics. If they don't trust to whatever mission anybody wanted to send, they have all rights to refuse it. And what I know there is a
So is anybody seeing this, I wonder?
Chinese and Western propaganda, they are not part of this mass media fight. Only know that we are in very good terms with China, a very important trade and investment partner for our region. We maintain very predictable and stable relationship with them, and we trust to the government of China what they're claiming.
You talk about trust, you talk about the relationship that Kyrgyzstan has with China, and that's another point that has been raised as a concern in the headlines. Chinese debt. Kyrgyzstan owes around $5 billion in foreign debt, and more than 40% of its debt, that is around $1.8 billion, is owed to China. And this is money that was borrowed over the last decade for infrastructure projects under the Belt and Road Initiative. Do you believe that your country is caught in a Chinese debt trap?
My positive vision of that trap. Actually, we start to relationship with China.
Thank you for the eggs. Sounds nice.
Central Asia. So we really borrowing from China.
Such a beautiful day. Should go for a walk, but I can't get to my teepee from the road. We should at least get out of the house, though, shouldn't we?
Yeah, my road is quite accessible. It's going on the main road.
And what China is giving to us, offering for us, is good for us. So using this money, not only for my country, but all Central Asian states, in order to improve people's lives.
And you say, last year in February, the new Kyrgyz president, Sadir Japarov, raised concerns over the high levels of debt. He was saying that Chinese money is improving the lives of people in your country. But this is what the president said, and I'm quoting, if we do not pay some of the debt on time, we will lose many of our properties. China, like I said, is the largest creditor for Kyrgyzstan, and Beijing has been reluctant to grant large-scale loan waivers. Do you still believe that Kyrgyzstan is benefiting from Chinese money and is in a position to meet its debt obligations?
I know what kind of credit agreement is signing with China. There is no obligation to
pledge whatever national property are. Of course, we still have a responsibility and obligation, but in terms of overall debt level to GDP, our debt level to GDP is sustainable level. And we have a law which will allow from my country to have sovereign borrowing above certain line. We are still below that line, and we can comfortably borrow again. So our government really looking very carefully about level of debt which we have in terms of sovereign